Weary, we come seeking renewal. Divided, we meet seeking unity. Torn, we gather seeking wholeness, and anxious, we collect seeking peace. May these gifts abound in this holy space on this holy hour, and may we be made better by what we offer one another and the world. Let us join in our opening hymn, number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth.
Now
bees and wild strawberries and crunchy autumn leaves and frogs and bunnies and birds, all kinds of things. One fall day, he built a huge leaf pile, but just as he was about to jump in, a wind whirled by and scattered the leaves. "Wind," shrieked Benjamin, "stop blowing!" But the wind did not listen. When Benjamin was old enough, he began to roam the woods by himself. One spring day, he built a beautiful boat from twigs and bark and took it to the pond. But just as the little boat left his hand, the wind snatched it and swept it out of reach. "Wind," yelled Benjamin, "stop blowing!" But the wind did not listen. The wind never listens. When Benjamin had begun at school for a few years, he discovered he was very good at writing. One night he stayed up late creating his masterpiece, a story about how the sun conquered the wind in a contest. But on the way to school the next morning, the wind tore the papers from his hand and carried them away. "Wind," yelled Benjamin, "stop blowing!" But the wind did not listen. By the time Benjamin became a man, he was convinced the wind was out to get him. It spoiled his plans, ruined his work, and stole several of his best hats. Finally, Benjamin Snooks had had enough. "Wind," he roared, shaking his fist in the air, "you are nothing but trouble. If you won't leave me alone, I will go where you can't find me." Benjamin Snooks packed everything he owned into a sack and went deep into the forest. There he built himself a snug cabin. Hidden among the trees, he felt safe. But one autumn evening, Benjamin heard a rustling sound that soon grew into a creaking and moaning. It was the wind, tearing the leaves from the trees and howling through the bare branches. The shutters to the cabin banged and the windows rattled. Benjamin could not sleep. "Wind," he screamed, "stop blowing!" But the wind did not listen. In the morning, Benjamin got his hammer and boarded up all the windows. "I'll show that wind," he said. Now there was no light inside the house. Benjamin could not see to read or write. He tripped and bumped into the walls, but at least it was quiet. One dark evening, Benjamin sat by the fire drinking tea. Outside, the wind swirled around the cabin and over the roof. Suddenly, a great gust swished down the chimney and blew soot and sparks everywhere. "Wind," yelled Benjamin, "stop blowing!" But the wind did not listen. The next morning, Benjamin climbed a ladder to the roof and covered the chimney. "I'll show that wind," he said. Without a chimney, he could have no fire. Without a fire, the cottage grew cold and damp. Benjamin developed sniffles and a sore throat. He could not even boil water for tea. He was terribly grumpy. "Wind," he croaked, "this is all your fault." But the wind did not listen. Benjamin spent a long, lonely winter in his cold, dark cabin. When spring came, he crept outside to see and smell and feel the world again. He was sitting on his front step when he heard a faint voice. "Benjamin Snooks." Benjamin looked around. There was no one there. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am the wind," whispered the voice. "Leave me alone," cried Benjamin. "You spoil everything." "Benjamin Snooks," replied the wind, "listen to me. You say I am nothing but trouble, but who really made this mess? You tell me to stop blowing, but imagine if I did. Do you suppose I just travel the world just to bother you? When I pass by, I am busy herding the clouds, bringing the rain, cooling the earth." The wind plucked the cap off Benjamin's head, and sometimes just having fun. Benjamin looked at his cabin. He saw the windows he had boarded up, the chimney he had covered up. He felt silly and sad. "What should I do?" he asked the wind. The answer was so soft that Benjamin could hardly hear it. "Go fly a kite." Did the wind laugh as it swirled away? For a long time, Benjamin Snooks sat outside and thought. The next day, he packed his bag and went back to where he had come from. He built a little home by the sea. The wind still blows there, as it does everywhere. Sometimes it shakes Benjamin's house and rattles his windows. Now and then it makes a mess and upsets his plans. When this happens, Benjamin takes a breath and remembers that the wind is only doing what the wind does, being itself, working hard, and sometimes having a little fun. So that story reminds me to have a little bit of fun in this cold, changing weather. I hope it reminds you to do that as well. Thanks for listening to the story.
Please remain seated for our prayer hymn, number 398 in the gray hymnal, To See the World. In the silence that follows the spoken prayer, you are invited to come forward to light a candle for any joys or concerns that you hold in your heart this morning. This prayer of Reverend Michelle Collins is titled, The Choice We Make. Spirit of life, we come carrying the burden of our own discouragements, the job that didn't work out, the relationship that ended, the dream deferred once again. Some mornings, it feels easier to stay in bed than to face another day of uncertainty. Yet here we are, gathered in this place that reminds us that hope is not a feeling we wait for, but a choice we make. Hold gently those among us who struggle to find reasons for hope, whose depression whispers lies about their worth, whose anxiety paints tomorrow in fearful colors. Grant us patience with our own healing and compassion for our stumbling towards wholeness. May we learn that hope is not the absence of struggle, but the decision to keep walking through it. Help us remember that even our smallest steps forward matter, that courage comes not from feeling brave, but from acting despite our fear. May we find hope in unexpected places, in the kindness of strangers, in our own capacity to survive, in this community that holds us when we cannot hold ourselves. Amen. I will light a candle for the joys and concerns of those beloveds joining us virtually, and a candle for all else that we hold in our hearts and our minds this morning. If your heart is hurting, know that your community is here to help, as is Reverend Jane. Please reach out with any needs. These the words of scientist and Native American Robin Wall Kimmerer. Even a wounded world is feeding us. Even a wounded world holds us, giving us moments of wonder and joy. I choose joy over despair, not because I have my head in the sand, but because joy is what the earth gives me daily, and I must return the gift. In this moment, and with joy, let us do our part, for we too have received much from this wounded world, and it is by returning the gift that we help to heal it as we build and perpetuate our beloved community. For those of you watching the service online, you may contribute to a virtual offering plate using the donate button on our website or by mailing a check to the church office. I invite the ushers forward to receive the offering. For all that you give and all that you do for our church and its wider concerns, we give thanks.
Thank you for having me back. It's wonderful to be with you. Jane and I have swapped pulpits once. This is the third time that we've done this. I served the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Princeton, New Jersey, which was Jane's first church. She started going there back when she was in college. And as you know, is now your minister and a wonderful colleague in our faith. And my congregation loves it when she comes back to preach, and I love coming down here to be with you. On its own, I really do love coming down here to be with you, but I like this Sunday for another reason, because for about 2 or 3 months prior to it, every Sunday in Princeton, I hear the question, when is Jane coming back? When is Jane coming back? When is Jane coming back? So it's nice to have that, now, she's there now doing her thing, so that's great. I'll get a few months off from that. We have 2 readings. I forgot about one when David helped put the service together, but the first reading is a poem titled A Gathering of Physicists by Janice Freitag, A Gathering of Physicists. It was 1979, and our freshman class of physics majors had cosmic aspirations. We wanted to be an irresistible force. We wanted to be waves rippling across space, undiminished by friction or wind resistance. We wanted to be beams of light, traveling straight and true through the universe. We were superior to other scientists. Biologists could not reassemble the life they dissected. Chemists only made plastics and adhesives and poisonous gas, but we had light, and light was immortal. We could split her, filter her, bounce her forever through a gauntlet of mirrors. Light would never die, and we would be light. But even light bends to gravity, and here we were, decades later, pulled back to the labs where we first met. We had been dimmed by dust. Dark matter was real. Black holes had claimed some of us. Life had run us through its spectrometer to show us what we were made of. We were found wanting. We should have heard the cosmic microwave background playing like music in our ears. We should have foreseen the accelerating expansion of all that we didn't know. We should have searched sooner and harder for the God particle. Here, at the end, we tell each other we should have believed. And our second reading is the poem, A Religious Background by Mary Brown. This is the one in your order. In the year that I was born, at a small religious college in northern Illinois, witnesses recall how just after dinner one winter evening, a young confessor sparked a fervor. 42 straight hours of repentance. Studious co-eds and baseball stars alike, suddenly afire. They were warm with desire to admit their wrongs to their peers, to make their sins public and announce themselves godly and free. I was born not long before those penitents were born again, before they streamed boldly onto that sacred stage, became oddly patient, and waited their turn in choir chairs to declare their shame, articulate, eyes wet. While they wept, I wept too, a generation and states away, until Mother, who knew nothing of fire or college or regret, lifted me from cradle to font and rocked me in an arms and flesh theology. Both of us quiet now, neither of us with much, maybe nothing at all, to confess. And let us join in the hymn 34, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire.
Oh
In the time just after the beginning, the people had begun to rebel against God. They fought and warred with each other. They disobeyed divine guidance in thought, word, and deed. They turned from the holy toward profane substitutes. They were idolaters, and the Holy One never liked that. The Holy One who had created them believed them to be beyond redemption and decided to flood them out. They were wicked, not the good Broadway and feature film kind of wicked, but the awful beyond hope kind of wicked. They would be wiped from the face of the earth. However, a few people were righteous, and they were given holy instructions on how to survive the flood. A sacred vessel would carry them through the storm, safe from the waters, until the rains abated and dry land appeared, where they could disembark and begin anew. There they would be fruitful. There they would multiply. They would re-people the earth and see if they could get it right this time. Some will recall the outline of this flood story from the book of Genesis in the Hebrew Scriptures. That story is really two stories woven together from different sources. They may both reflect the same event, or they may not, but they were authored separately in different places, and they are likely influenced by pre-existing flood stories from cultures very far away. Floods were common and deadly and commonly caused mass migration. People created stories to explain them, and the stories would travel along with trade and conquest and gradually become expressed as part of the culture in the new land. And sometimes ancient stories that resemble each other pop up among cultures that never interacted with each other at all, as is the case with this one. For this flood story that has an outline that resembles the Hebraic flood narratives is really an ancient one from the Hopi nation, which is centered in what is now Arizona. That nation goes back 2,000 years, but it was created by cultures that preceded that identity by several thousands of years. The roots are so deep that we'll never know their ends, for them, the Israelites, and for us. We all come from life sunk deep into the earth, nourishing us still, though we sometimes forget that and believe that we walk on our own. In that Hopi flood myth, the Holy had already destroyed the world a couple of times by fire and by ice. This time it was by water. The saving vessel was not an ark, but these big reeds, these big tubular plants that Spider-Woman, another deity, had fixed up so that people could float inside of them while the waters raged. I would prefer a big reed to an ark full of smelly animals. That just seems like a nicer journey. But eventually, with lots of twists and turns for you to explore as you wish, some of the clans in these reeds survive, some turn out to be good, and some not so much. And before long, it becomes clear that this angry flood didn't seem to solve evil any more than any of the other angry floods or fires or ice storms that people imagine. The deity that creates often turns to destroy, but that destruction is tempered by the desire to continue some good part of creation. Yet no matter how good that part is, it never becomes the fullness of life post-apocalypse. The people, we never seem to learn our lesson. And in narrative after narrative after narrative, the Eden or its equivalent that is promised to arise through death and suffering is short-lived at best. Perhaps the way to paradise will never be paved with death and destruction. It can be glimpsed, at most imagined, but it quickly dissolves into the broader human story, which always includes evil and must at least try to explain it. One thing we can say is that flooding the earth across the world and throughout ancient time never seems to wash away evil. Evil must be stronger than the waters everywhere in all times. Maybe as the deities of the stories learn these lessons, we are meant to as well, that since evil causes suffering and death can't end evil. By one count, there are 150 ancient flood narratives from around the world. Those are the ones that we know of, that can be documented. I'd imagine there are more by a factor of thousands that we'll never know of. It would be unreasonable to think that one is right and all the others are wrong. It would also be unreasonable to think that all of them are all completely wrong. It would be perfectly reasonable to think that each has meaning and wisdom, and that while we may be called more to some than others, each reflects the timeless human desire to learn, grow, connect, and to pass along wisdom and morality to the generations that follow us. We are all drawn to telling stories about what has happened and imagining why, and sometimes we end up using the same motifs and narratives and images, even though they are stamped with the unique expressions of various times and cultures. In a sense, they belong to those times and cultures, but in a sense, they are always much bigger than them as well. Appreciated among one another, they can point us toward common searches for meaning and purpose. They can point us all toward the big questions of why we are here with others and what we are to do with our one life and our collective lives. We learn about ourselves and one another, of our commonalities and differences by approaching with appreciation and an open mind the layered wisdom that these stories have to offer. But we don't learn literal history or science, just the folklore of people creating stories to pass along values, to teach and guide those to come. We learn about their biases and compare them to the ones that we hopefully are aware that we harbor today. We don't learn about floods that literally cover the earth, but we learn that people make common meaning of whatever floods they do encounter in their lives. We can study the stories and relay them to real occurrences, understanding them as descriptions of events that occurred way before the accounts were usually written down. We can embrace them as full of wisdom, though they're not factual. They're full of meaning, though they're not literally true. And yet the call to literally accept the images and stories of sacred books has sounded throughout the existence of sacred books. There's something stifling about writing down as set in stone what had been conveyed by word of mouth for centuries and millennia before. When stories are told aloud, they shift and change from telling to telling. The same story is told often but never really twice, for something changes in each version. But written down and codified, scribes and authorities are able to squeeze the creativity out of what had been a more vibrant oral culture. Writing the stories down made them more transmissible, more widely, especially as time went on, but it also led some to approach scripture as this set of SOPs, as a strict rule book held in the authority of the most anxious, seeking to squash the creative ambiguity of the spirit in place of a rigid uniformity. This turned what had been a process of exploring answers and living into answers into one aimed solely at giving those answers. People have always used reason to challenge this uniformity, especially when its desired end was the literal embrace of something untrue or the moral embrace of something unethical. Reason in Western religion has opened up doors of insight that weave together the disciplines, that allow science and literature and mathematics and medicine and technology and theology to speak to one another of how they all make sense of the world. Reason over time, and to be sure quite imperfectly, has resulted in greater freedoms for greater numbers of people. In terms of rights, the edges of dignity and equality that we move toward today are distanced from centers that were the edges of yesterday. And good old humanistic reason has fueled much of that progress, imperfect as it may have been and may still be. Reason challenged detestable ideologies. It exposed as paper-thin and pride-obsessed demands that one accept the untrue and immoral just because an authority claimed it. Reason was a tool of the courageous, who applied an internal sense of understanding as an inner compass to a problematic teaching or instruction. And then sometimes they challenged the teaching publicly and faced repercussions for doing so. Reason fueled that sense of challenge, the expectation that one would submit to an authority of office or ordination against one's inner conscience. Reason proclaimed that one's inner conscience was more of an authority, especially when that conscience was formed by the kind of knowledge attained by time and study, which is one of the tricky things in today's world. Reason usually takes time and thought, and we live in a world where both of those are not embraced. Reason also tends to listen to and consider others' opinions before outright rejecting them, when today we crave the fast and easy other offered by this hot take and that one. Reason is deliberate, and though quite imperfect, reason adapts and changes. It grows. It folds in new teachings and understandings, reaches new conclusions, which then shift and grow as we continue to. Reason challenges and embraces and then does it again and again, each time with the conscience of the individual rising in authority. However, reason is indeed used sometimes toward horrific conclusions, and the same can be said of Scripture, and certainly ecclesial power and tradition and all sources of religious authority. The emotional needs of the undifferentiated, immature leaders has caused untold suffering over the millennia. Reason is far from perfect and is best thought of as not perfectible, but it can and does lead many to reject the horrific, to search for human and humane guidance in how we live our lives, and to look beyond just one source or one person for wisdom and guidance. In this manner, reason is a human tool, used as all other human tools are used for the good and the evil. Which one it strengthens is in the hands and hearts of those who use it. In our faith, reason has long been a central guiding source of authority, but has moved more to the periphery over recent decades. It's still expressed in our denomination statement of shared values as part of our heritage, but it's not one of the 6 current values of today. It's definitely not at the center. I think that this movement toward the margins occurred because for a long time in our faith, reason was used to discredit this or that, but not really to construct this or that. It became a tool of objection and rejection when people eventually want to move toward affirmation and embracing. The means became the end for us, and by us I mean those of us who love using reason to discern this or that. The end is service beyond the self, service of the holy, service of the world, service of the good and true and life-affirming and creative and diverse, and that which honors the elders and puts our children first, that which builds a world of more hope, love, justice, and joy. But for some, yours truly included, for some years, reason became that with which we just endlessly critiqued, automatically rejected, and made irrational mountains out of metaphoric molehills. Reason became something to make us feel smarter, and was that for which we forlornly yearned for a world to restrictively and relentlessly embrace. Meanwhile, the faithful gathered not primarily to critique, but to seek, to sustain, to serve, and to celebrate. It also moved to the margins because reason has long been seen as the polar opposite of emotion, which is a very old and very false binary. The two dance together in everyone, just one usually leads more than the other in most people. Watch an actor really study and learn their role, and you'll see great reason at work. Watch an astronomer describe what's going on with a solar eclipse, and you'll see childlike joy and wonder pierce through all that smart science talk. Actor and astronomer are more alike than unalike, and we all think and feel and live in that very same abundance. This got confusing in our faith because one of the strengths of reason is that it can distance us from the passions of others, passions that we don't feel, passions that we reject, like the passions of the poet, who knew that in the revival of which he wrote, the mother cradling her baby would have been taught as draped in sin, with the baby being born in original sin. And yet the poet names the profanity of that very proclamation and knows that there is nothing to be confessed or preached of sin when a mother cradles her baby. That is only holy. There is only goodness there. Reason can lead one there, or faith, prayer, devotion, tradition. There are many paths that can lead to that sense of the holy, and one's sense only gratitude abounds for that moment. There's no sin. There's no shame. There's no regret. But in our faith, reason's skepticism about the constant primacy of emotion and passion mistakenly came to mean that all emotion and all passion were suspect. It was just never supposed to be that way. Reason was never supposed to tamper down our passions and emotions. It was supposed to tamper down the expectation that we would always be led by our passions, or much more importantly, those of others. Reason was meant to free us from following passions that we found nonsensical or abhorrent. It was never meant to keep us from amazement, speechlessness, incredible wonder, and gratitude. It was never meant to, and never possibly could, make us passionless. It was just meant to be another tool, and for some the primary one, through which we embrace and understand life, and life in community. For we all drink from wells we did not dig. We all shine under the light of stars we did not create. We all live in a mystery uncovered by poets and scientists, by seers and skeptics, by storytellers and textbook writers. We live in essays and songs, in paintings and sculptures. We live in blueprints and post-it notes. We live centered in how we understand life and meaning, but always facing different perspectives and understandings that nurture us, that challenge us, and that cause us to grow. And when we enjoy that blessed diversity, the many stories that try to make sense of this great mystery can be woven together to tell us not really about the holy, but about ourselves and about one another. Holy stories teach us about humankind, our human family, our human connections that span all time and all place. Holy stories tell us about the great human story, explored freely through reason and leading to excitement, explored lovingly through service and leading to blessings, explored with gratitude and leading to a community where skeptics and wanderers come together to survive the floods, and with human hands and holy worlds, build the world anew after each and every one of them. One common thing about flood narratives is that they usually involve one or a few trying to save the world or tasked with rebuilding the world. A few are saved, but most are lost. But in the Unitarian Universalist version, all are saved and none are lost. But we have to work to make that happen. For in our stories, from whatever source, we all build the ark and we all float in the planet. We do so not just for ourselves, but we do so for everyone. So whether reason has us grab a hammer to build a boat, or a divine whisper tells us to, we all build it together. And then when the rain starts falling, everyone gets the board, and when it ends, we all rebuild the world again and again. May it be so, and amen. Let us rise for our closing hymn, which is 131, Love Will Guide Us. Postlude today. Bob and Gabby Boguslaw, father and daughter team, will offer a lovely postlude, so stay put for that. It'll be a great way to end the service and go on into our day. Go forth grateful for the moments before you, the breath within you, the people among you, and the Spirit guiding you to lives of love and kindness and beauty. And go forth knowing that you are held always and always with everyone else by that great love of no beginning and never ending. Go in peace and amen.